Welcome to the Careers by Jenn podcast, episode 243. On this episode of the podcast, Jenn speaks with Michael Cirrocco about the value of your past experience. Michael's nickname is C-Roc, which, if you're a fan of the Canadian TV show Trailer Park Boys, is kind of amusing. Know what I'm saying?
You're listening to the Careers by Jenn podcast. I'm your host, Jenn Swanson. This is the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. Careers by Jenn is a listener-sponsored podcast, and if you like the content, please consider supporting the show as a patron. You can do so for as little as $1 a month. Head over to CareersbyJenn.com and click on support to learn more. Welcome to episode 243 of the Careers by Jenn podcast. Before we get to the podcast topic of today, I wanted to share a couple of Apple Podcast reviews with you. This first one is titled Great Career Advice. Excellent content and host for those who want to get the job they love. Who doesn't want that? Listen and learn. And that's from Terry in Fairhope. Thank you so much, Terry. I really appreciate that you took the time to leave us a review. And this next one made me laugh out loud. It's titled, Jenn is a bubbly ball of grace. Jenn is full of grace, shining a light on real struggles in the workplace. And that is from Pro31, and it came via Apple Podcasts as well. So thank you very much, Pro31. I really appreciate being labeled that way. I really do. I think it's very sweet. Thank you so much for these reviews. If you have a moment to leave the show a review, I would really appreciate it. It doesn't take a lot of time. Just go over to Apple Podcasts and search Careers by Jenn in your country. Click on the show and click rate and review, and write me a little note and help to share the show, and you might just hear it read on an upcoming episode. All right. Well, how much value do you place on your past experience? My guest today is Michael Cirrocco. Mike is a motivator, a facilitator, a dynamic public speaker, and he's a fierce friend and coach. His passion is truly helping others, whether it's his employees, his partners, his real estate agents, or anyone else looking to better their business, their personal life, or their mental game. C-Roc, as he's known, is always up for the challenge. He's spoken in front of thousands of real estate agents, showing them how to grow their business. He dives deep into his past during these talks to show you how you can feed off good and bad experiences. And he's got an upcoming book called What Are You Made Of? Here is our conversation on past experience. Past experience is key on a resume and in a job interview, but what do you do if your past experience was not positive?
So I would guess that the best answer, because I have to guess on this one, I haven't ran into this before, but I would, for right off the cuff, I would take it and really visualize the interview ahead of time going into it and run it through your mind first so that you're confident and prepared. Because I think that when you're confident and prepared, you can get over lack of experience. Because what's going to happen is when you're talking and answering questions or just conversing, you're going to come across a lot better, more confident, and more experienced, even though that you don't have the experience to speak of. And also, the best thing to do also is to share your experiences, even if they weren't the best, of what you've learned from them and how you've overcome them.
Right. So that piece about what you've learned is important. I fully agree, and I always tell my clients to practice any possible questions you can think of so that you have answers that sound like thoughtful and well put together, and so that you say things that you really want to say rather than panic and say something you don't want to say. So that's a good point.
Right.
And what the value, we're talking today about the value of your past experience. And I know resumes have changed a lot over the past several years, and we're more interested in competencies and key skills and all those kinds of things. But experience is still really important, right?
Yes, I think it is. To be honest with you, first of all, I'm glad to be here today. I just want to thank you for having me on the Careers by Jenn podcast with you, Jenn. And one of the things, just to be totally honest with you, I've never had to do a resume before. And the reason for that is I've always focused, ever since I was in probably elementary school, on building relationships. And I don't know why. It just came naturally, or I watched my father, my grandparents. They were always really personable. And I always worked on and focused on building relationships with people. So whenever I needed a career or a job, I just went to my relationships. So I'm not saying that can work for everyone. However, I would always like and advise people to look into their relationships for job opportunities, for business opportunities. And so that's something just for me, not having to ever write a resume because of those reasons. But I usually only speak from experience. And when I get a resume, actually, Jen, a lot of times I hire people. So when I look at a resume, generally I look through it to see if it's put together properly. People don't have a lot of grammatical errors. That's pay attention to detail. Those are the kinds of things I look at. And a couple, I look at their job history as well, but really the resume is not as important to me. And I like to get them on the phone, look at their social media. And once I talk to them on the phone, I can tell pretty much after looking at their social media pages and talking to them whether they'd be a good fit in our organization.
That's fantastic information, because that's what I'm teaching people as well. I mean, the resume is your first step in the door. Often you don't even get the chance to talk on the phone, or people don't even bother looking at your social media if your resume is not up to snuff as far as being well put together. So I think that's really good. And if you're applying for a position and there's 1,200 people applying for it, that's stiff competition. So sometimes people have to put out resumes to even get that second look. But I completely agree that the resume is really not a good indicator of who that person is or how well they'll do in a position.
Right. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I look at when a new candidate comes around, if they really want the job and they're submitting a resume, and they don't follow up with an email, a phone call, or they don't try to find out who the hiring person is or who the decision maker is, that matters to me. So if you really want a job somewhere and you found the place that you would love to work, just like anything, I preach about this all the time, commit to it once you've made the decision, and then do whatever it takes and find out whoever you have to talk to get the job. And if you don't, then you just find the next place and then do the same thing and do it over and over again. But if you just send a resume, which happens so often, people just email a resume in. And that's it. They leave it at that. They set themselves up for failure.
Yeah, and it's sometimes a blanket resume where they haven't tailored it to the job either. So it tells you that they haven't actually looked into your company and done the industry research, as I call it.
Right. And you know what? Before I want to go into something with you real quick, because this will explain some of the answers that I give you to these things. I believe everyone has a story, and talking about past experiences, I don't think it always comes from what college you went to, what school you went to, what job you had. A lot of past experiences and what you're made of is, by the way, that's a movement I'm starting. What are you made of movement? What you're made of is your past experiences with your family, growing up as a child. So I always tell this story because it explains some things that I'm going to answer. When I was 11 years old, I had a turning point. And, I came from a broken home, like a lot of your listeners probably. So a lot of you can relate. And I never knew my parents together. So I would do the old thing where I'd go to, one parent's for every other weekend, custody type situation. My dad sold me when I was 8 years old on moving in with him and his new wife. And he was pretty well off, had a masonry job, his own business. They sold me on all the bells and whistles to an 8-year-old, a new puppy, my own room, a waterbed, if you remember waterbeds.
Yeah.
And I bought into it, and I broke my mom's heart at that time and moved in with my dad when I was 8. For 3 years, though, after that, I dealt with a lot of emotional and mental abuse. And it came a lot from my stepmother being jealous of me and my dad's relationship. But my dad was my hero. I looked up to him. He always had this wad of $100 bills in his pocket. And I always looked up to that. For some reason, it wasn't about greed or the cash itself. It was the fact that I saw what my dad used the money for. And we had vacations and we went out to dinner and we had nice things. And I always, as a kid, I looked up to that. Now, whether that was the right thing to do or not, I don't know. But I was 8 years old at that time. And by the time I was 11, I decided at that moment I had to get out of that environment. I didn't know the word culture. And I know we talk about culture a lot in these types of podcasts, but I didn't know what the word culture meant. But I knew what a good environment and a bad environment was. And that environment was not conducive to happiness or growth. So I decided to get out. My dad got court papers from my mom. One day I came home from school, Jen, and I walked on eggshells as it was in this household. And my dad said, "Hey, get in your room." As soon as I walked in the door, "Get in your room." And I'm like, oh boy. So my stomach was tied in knots. Imagine an 11-year-old kid getting ready to get it handed to him. And he came in and he said, "Hey, these papers say you want to move back with your mom. Are you sure you want to do that? You know, they don't have it that well there." And he was right. My mom, we lived in like a $30,000 house, 30,000 US. And, you know, we didn't have the best, you know, we go on vacation. It was a trip to the beach, to the ocean, and we packed our clothes in black trash bags, literally. And I knew that. But you know what? Happiness meant more at that moment. And I wanted to be in a better environment that I could grow in and be happy. And so I decided to make that move. Now, when he heard that and I agreed, yeah, I did decide to move with my mom. He took out that wad of $100 bills that I looked up to him for. He peeled one off, crumpled it up, and threw it at me. And he said, "Here, you're going to need this when you're living on the streets with your mom one day."
Ouch.
Now, I was 11 at that moment, and I was crushed. My hero telling me that. But, Jen, at that moment, 31 years ago, I'm 42 years old, so, yeah, 31 years ago, I said to myself, I can't be the only one that this is happening to. I can't be the only one that their father's given up on them. Somebody's given up on them. And I vowed at that moment, I remember this as clear as day, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. But I knew that I was going to, one, help other people that have been in the same situation where someone's given up on them. And number two, I was not going to let my dad win. So that moment right there, I have to tell you the story because you got to know where I come from and what I'm made of. And I use that story for any hurdle, roadblock that comes my way, any tough times. I ask myself, what are you made of, man? What have you been through? Look at what you've been through. And when things are going good, Jen, because things aren't always going bad, right?
Right.
I always want to take things to the next level. I look at it from that point of view as well and say, hey, listen, what are you made of? Let's take it up a notch. So when I give you the answers to these questions, I want you to know where I'm coming from and what I'm made of with this. And I'm very passionate about what I do in my job. And by the way, I run a mortgage company, a division for Nations Lending in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. It's a home loan company. We have 30 employees, and we do mortgages for a living. But really what it comes down to is we're in the people building business. We help people, and we help grow people into the fullest potential. So just that, I wanted to go into that before we go any other questions because I wanted people to understand where I come from on some of these answers that I'm giving.
So when you're talking about past experience, then you're talking about more than, like you said, what college you go to, what work experience you have. How do you convey that to your advantage in a job interview, for example?
So let me ask you this. Would you agree that when you're in a job interview or trying to get a job, you're trying to sell someone on something that you want?
I
right?
would, yeah.
So I feel everybody's in sales. Everyone,
yeah.
right? And sales can have a negative connotation, but I really believe everyone is in sales and everybody needs to embrace that because the faster they do, the faster they'll get what they want and be able to help more people. And also sales is solving problems. So when you're looking for a job, you're trying to solve the problem of you not having a job or you needing a better job. So the way that I would convey this and help people understand this, I want everybody to understand how important their story is. Because if somebody came in to interview with me, Jen, and told me their story similar to what I just told you, or it doesn't have to be similar to that, but any story and what they've come through and what their goals are going forward, I look at that way more powerful than any job that they've had in the past or college that they went to. So that's something that I really want to get out to people. And that's this movement, the What Are You Made Of movement, for everybody to understand. Share your story. And there's 4 reasons people don't share their story. And one of the main reasons is they feel like they're alone in it, and nobody else has gone through that story that they went through. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, they're embarrassed by it. They think people will judge them, and they're worried about what people think.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, they think no one will care. Nah, nobody. Why would anybody care? And that's one, I can tell you, that's a big one for me. I thought, hey, who cares? Nobody's going to care. But when I started telling this story, the feedback that I got blew me away. And number 4, they underestimate the power their story can have to impact and inspire others. So those 4 things really people need to embrace and grasp on sharing their story of their past. And then with their job interview, if they're looking for a job or they're trying to hire people or join a team or what have you, build a company, sharing that story on the first meeting with people to let them know where you come from is so impactful.
And so I have a question about that. When you share the story about your father, has your father heard the story?
Yeah. So I went through a phase for 10 or so years where I didn't see him. And then I got back together with him when his father, my grandfather was dying. And the funny thing is my dad and I get along great. If we hang out right now, I could get along with him. We could have a beer, sit down and talk, enjoy each other's company. But we don't talk. We went through a 10-year phase when we were talking, and then something happened with his wife, and all communication was cut off on their part. And so he's heard the story. He knows he lived the story, so he knows it. And I haven't had a chance to really talk to him about it. But the fact of the matter is, talking about, and I don't know why you asked that, but I'm going to guess is because maybe some people think, well, I can't share these stories because it might be affecting my family.
Right.
Well, the fact of the matter is, if my dad hears that story, he's got 2 choices. He can get upset about it and stay in a hole, or he can come out to me and talk to me and approach me, which I've already forgiven him for. There's not even a problem with that because I've hung out with him since then. But we could develop the relationship again after that. And so I'm not concerned with that part as much because it's a part of my life. It's a part of my story. And if I can impact other people that have gone through that, that's way more important to me.
I ask because I resonate with it in that my father left when I was 2 and I didn't meet him again until I was 11. So, a similar, different circumstances, but similar in that there was a long period of time where I had no idea who this person really was. So interesting. I'm sure there are thousands of people out there with these similar stories.
Right. And here's the thing, Jen, when I would have never known that about you probably unless I shared this story.
Right.
But another thing that I do when I'm networking, and this is great for your listeners as well. When you're networking, instead of just saying, hey man, the weather's great today, or man, did you see the rain?
Right.
Most people go to that line, something about weather, right?
Right. It's easy. It's neutral.
Right. But it gets
not
old,
political.
Right? It gets old. So here's the thing I do. One of the things that I do, and I've created this and it's worked phenomenally. I always go up to people and say, hey, listen, everybody's got a story. What's your story? And I just sit back. Now, if somebody doesn't want to share something, that's fine. They'll come up with something to say.
Right.
But you get them talking about themselves.
Yes.
And people love to talk about themselves.
They do.
And I've been in a networking situation where they talk about themselves the whole time. They tell me their story. I never say anything about myself. We leave. And then I hear somebody that knows them said, hey, so-and-so met you and they thought you were the most awesome person in the world. And here I never told them anything about myself. I just had them talking about themselves. So that's I call it a pickup line. I'm married. I'm not talking about picking up chicks, quote unquote.
Right.
I'm talking about when you go out and networking and my pickup line is, hey, everybody's got a story. What's yours?
Right.
And it works. So I would just challenge everyone, try it. And I'd love to hear the feedback from it.
Yeah, I interviewed some people in the show, in the history of the show. I've got at least 1, possibly 2 that talk about the power of story. And it is much more helpful, much more real, I think, than talking about the weather. You talked earlier about relationships in getting jobs and looking for work. And how would a person begin to do that if you don't know the company and you don't know anyone in the company?
Okay, so that's a different situation, obviously. If you have a company that you want to work for and it's not through a relationship that you have, one of the things that, we talk about putting a resume in, finding out their application process. But if you handle it just like you're handling sales, for example, even if you're not a salesperson, you need to take certain steps. And what that has to do with is obviously finding out their application process, but then what's most important is the follow-up. So if somebody's applying for my company for a job and they submit an application, I would look at it from my point of view, looking out how I'd want them to approach us. In-person visit off the street is out of the norm, if that's possible. Once you find out who the decision maker is, call and set up an appointment to come in anyway and not wait for them to call you. Send in an email, send in a handwritten card, whatever it takes in your mind to get their attention and have an opportunity to sit down with someone, then to be able to share your story. That's what it takes. And if you really want the job, so here's what happens, Jen. Some people submit a resume and then they don't hear anything and they're like, well, I tried.
Right.
And that's not good enough. But that's good enough in their brain. That's their little negative person in their head talking to them, saying, hey, you tried. Good job. Go to the next one. But what we have to do is we have to understand something. We have to figure out if we're committed to something, we need to write it down, whatever we're committed to, and then we have to do whatever it takes to get the job done. And those are the kinds of people that advance in companies, not only get the job, but advance in companies and move up in companies.
Right. And I was looking, I don't know if it was on LinkedIn or where it was. I was looking at a thread somewhere that was something about antiquated job advice that people are giving to millennials. And one of them said in this thread, said something negative about taking a resume in person into a company, that is so old school. But I think that because it's so old school and people don't do it anymore, maybe it is effective.
Yeah, it's not common. You don't see it. Now, I can tell you that it's happened here before, and you have to make sure your appearance is you're well put together, you're dressed properly.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times that it's happened here, the people are just disheveled. And I don't know why, and maybe they're in desperation mode, but you can't be in desperation mode. If you do that, walk in-person visit, first of all, I would try to call to set up an appointment, first of all, and do it that way. But if you just come in off the street, make sure you're well put together. You have you've run through in your mind what you're going to say, and understand that after you do that, if you don't get a hold of the person or you don't see the person you want to see, you make a phone call, you send an email, and you say, hey, it popped in to see you. Just wanted to let you know I'm following up. I left my resume with so-and-so. I would love to hear back from you, and I will follow up again in a couple of days. Mm. And if somebody did that in my office and they were like really, a good candidate, I mean, I'm going to get there. It's going to get my attention. And that's the key. Attention is the most important thing. You got to get attention on yourself somehow, some way.
Now, when you're telling your story, obviously you would rehearse this in advance so that it's not too long. So you're not taking up a lot of somebody's time when they're giving you that interview or that meeting, even if it's a meeting before an interview.
Right.
I call them informational interviews, where you're sitting down with somebody with a specific time frame, asking them to give you 20 minutes of their time and buying them a coffee kind of thing. But you don't want to take the entire 20 minutes up telling your story. So do you have any guidelines around getting ready to tell your story? Are there some things that are too personal, too intimate, too fast? Like what kind of guidelines would you give somebody about their storytelling?
So when you basically, the way I do it is I'll have three phases, not three phases, but three stories. Okay. I have a 90-second version of that. 3 versions, I should say. I have a 90-second version of it. Then I have a mid-range and a long range in case people want to know more details or they are asking questions. But you have to have a little quick elevator. We would call it an elevator. 90-second thing. Like, listen, I'm sure you've heard a lot of people come from broken homes. I came from a broken home. I never knew my parents together. I don't see my dad anymore. You know, he gave up on me because I wanted to live with my mom. He threw a $100 bill in my face, said, here, I'm going to need this when I'm living on the streets. I lived from that day trying to prove him wrong and trying to help other people that went through that situation. That was less than 90 seconds. That was probably 30 seconds. And so this is, you know, let's say I'm interviewing with you. Jenn, I want this job because I know I can do it. 1, I'm going to bring the most value that any employee can bring to you. And I'll show you that, because when I wake up in the morning, Jenn, my job to you would be to be the most valuable person around, period. And that's my goal. And I want to help people. I want to solve problems, and I want to bring value to your company. And I've learned that, you know, and you base it on that story. Now, whatever your story is, you got to formulate something that you've gotten from your story. That's what it all comes down to. Everybody has a story though, Jenn. I don't care how easy you've had it in life, how bad you've had it. Everybody has a story. And that's something that, you know, I plan on going on in the future of counseling people. Let's figure out what your story is. Let's develop something from your story to use for whether it's getting a job, starting a business, whatever it is.
And it's talking to your purpose. It's talking to what you've learned from it. And again, it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. It's coming back to our title, the value of your past experience, what that has done for you and how that has motivated you.
Exactly. And, you know, you can say anything to people. It could be all talk, right? But one of the things you got to share with people is, this is my story. Here's what I'm going to do. And I want you to hold me accountable. And if you tell someone that you're going to work for that you want accountability, you want them to hold you accountable, you're giving them permission to bust your chops, so to speak, when you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and to keep you in line. And that's one thing we do at our company. We every year we start a new year. We write our goals down for the year, but then we do it differently. We write our goals down every day after that. But every year we revisit our long-term goals. And my employees give me permission to get on them if they're falling off their activity levels, their expectations. So they sign a paper that says, hey, you're giving me a permission to ride you to your goals, to push you to greatness, so to speak. That's what we do here. And our culture of our company has changed ever since we've done all those things. But you gotta let people know that you're willing to be taught, coached, and held accountable. And if somebody came in my office and told me that, I don't even care if I have a position for them. I'd open something up for them.
Watch out. You're going to get a bunch of people, C-Roc.
That's fine. That's fine. We have big goals. We need people to reach our goals. So
that's pretty good. Yeah. So it's that challenge of getting it so that you can pitch it, so that you can tell it. And it needs to be real. It needs to be something you haven't invented.
Of course, yeah. And that's something that, you know, you got to sit down and just think. Get in a quiet place and just think about your life, what you've been through. Now, some people say, forget about your past. Live in the present. Look forward. But you know what? That's not, you're made of some things, right? You're made of these events and experiences, and that's how we've developed. I'm here to where I am today because of what I went through. So you need to look back, and that's a lot of ammo or tools in your toolbox that you could use for your future. And that's very important. So you need to sit down in a quiet place sometime and just think about things that you've went through, and how, not the fact that you're a victim and it happened to you, but how you got through them and how you actually won. And now you can stack those things up and start multiplying into your new experiences.
What keeps you going? What motivates you to do the work that you're doing?
So first and foremost, this will kind of lead into 3 things I wanted to cover with you today on using your past experiences and then looking for new careers. But one of the things that I do every day is I wake up with gratitude, first and foremost. So I wake up in the morning, first thing I say, man, thank God I'm alive. I'm ready to roll. My legs work. My feet work. I put my legs on the ground. I stand up. I'm like, thank you. Every single day. There's no exaggeration to that. So gratitude's a very important thing to me. And when I have an opportunity to make a difference in people, that's the next thing I say to myself every morning. Hey, what can I get into today to help someone? And that drives me. And that story that I told you is real, and it drives me. So then every single day, I know it sounds crazy, but every single morning I write my goals down. Long term, and what I want to do, what I want to accomplish today, what I want to accomplish this week, and I'm committed to them. And so that drives me. That's where I get my passion. And the other thing is that I know people are watching me. And I don't mean like Big Brother's watching you. but no matter where you are in your life right now, you're not alone. People, when you go out, people are watching you. They're watching to see how you react to things. They're watching to see what you accomplish. Some people are hoping you fail. Some people are rooting for you. But people are watching you, and I know that. And I have 2 kids, my wife, my employees. I know that I can't expect things from them unless I do what I'm supposed to do. So those are the kinds of things that drive me and keep me going. And I'm always trying to grow. I'm never satisfied where I am, because if you are satisfied where you are, you start to get complacent and you start to get comfortable. And I've been there, and that's another story that I can come on again and tell you about, but it's not a good place to be.
I've been doing a lot of reading lately about gratitude and about the science behind it, and the science behind looking forward and visualizing what your day is going to be like. There are actually meditations around that that have neurological impact. So it's quite fascinating that this keeps coming up with the people that I'm talking to and with the things that I'm reading. That gratitude is immensely powerful, and it's not woo-woo stuff. It's real science.
Yeah, and I'm speaking from experience, and I keep doing the same thing. I see it all over the place, which reinforces it. But it helps you not complain. There's no successful people out there rarely complain, Jen. They rarely complain. They're looking for problems to solve. If something comes up, they look at it as a problem that they can fix or they can work to fix. But they rarely complain. Now, all of us are human, and we all complain at some point. But the most successful people, to the degree you're successful, you won't complain. And so that's another thing. But there's 3 other things that I wanted to talk to you about today, too, in regards to looking for a job or being the best employee or looking for advancement. I've already mentioned this once, but when you wake up in the morning, I do this as well. I think to myself, how can I make myself the most valuable person today? To my wife, being the most valuable husband. What can I do to go out of my way to make her job easy? My kids, to be the best father that they can possibly have. I literally go through this every morning, and it sounds unreasonable to do, but I'm looking for unreasonable results. So how can I be the most valuable manager, or if I was an employee of where I work? What can I do to bring value to the company? Not, hey, when am I going to get my next raise, or complaining about the position that you're in? Because too many people look for, oh, I want a raise. They come in and ask for a raise. Or I look at, how can I add value? Because if I do that and I have the help first mentality, I know the raise is going to come. And either the raise is going to come at the job that I'm in, or I'm going to be adding so much value and being such a big help that if I go somewhere else, I'll be able to find another job, no problem, because of my work ethic and my approach to my job. So that's one. And then number 2, 100% responsibility. I don't know if you've heard of that being preached on, but 100% responsibility is something that we thrive on at our company here at Nations Lending. If something goes wrong, we don't look to blame, point fingers. We look at ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, what could I have done to change that or make a difference in that scenario? Even if it's the old school way where, it was Chris's fault. Chris messed up. No. What could I have done to help Chris not make that mistake?
Right.
And so what that does for us and you as an employee, if somebody's an employee, is it gives you the control. And the person that you would blame before, they don't have the control anymore. You're taking the control, which you want to have control in any environment that you're in, if you can help it. So when you take 100% responsibility, it takes the control from them. You have the control, and then you can learn from that and fix it the next time or help someone. And the blame game never works anyway. And the last thing is find ways to bring revenue into the company that you're working for. And what I mean by that, there's salespeople, there's producers. And then, for example, in our company, there's processors or admin people that process paperwork and chase things that we need to close loans. But if I can get those people bringing in loans too and bringing in revenue into the company, one, they can make more money on top of the regular. They become more valuable to me. And the money that they're bringing in, the revenue they bring into the company helps pay their salary. So if you're in a position and you're not in sales, obviously you got to try to sell as many units or whatever you have to do to make as much money as possible. But if you're not in sales, think of ways and talk to your manager or owner or whoever you work for. How can I bring revenue into this company? I would love to help bring revenue into this company to help out. If somebody came to me and said that wasn't in sales, I mean, I would do backflips, Jen. So
that's being all in and knowing that you've got a stake in it.
Exactly.
Because, sometimes when you work in a big organization, I worked in healthcare and then for 20-something years, and I worked in the college system teaching in classrooms. And those are big organizations where sometimes you feel like you don't matter. You feel like a little cog in the wheel, but that's not true. In fact, if you do your job to the best of your ability and don't need to be micromanaged and don't need to be told what to do and look for ways to better your environment and better the workflow and all the rest of it, then you become very valuable, even if you are, quote unquote, in a small, a small tiny piece of this larger organization.
Every piece matters. Every piece matters. Because here's the thing too. I don't care how big the company is. One person going off the rail against the culture, we call them salmon. You know how salmon swim upstream?
Yeah.
So our company's a stream and we're going in one direction. And we try to avoid any salmon being in our stream because we do not want that reverse flow. So if you have a large company even, that one salmon swimming up the stream causes problem. And then what happens is it can develop other fish to grow. And that's a problem, or a virus, or it's very contagious. You can't have that in a company. So I don't care again, if it's thousands of employees, one person starting to have a bad attitude or not giving it their all makes it okay for the next person next to them and the next person and the next person. And then before you know it, it's out of control. So, and the other thing is if you're an employee and you look at and you're in a big company, and you're thinking to yourself, what difference do I make? What difference do I make? That's just by saying that and then following through with not going above and beyond and not trying to add value, you're sabotaging yourself because your environment that you go to work for every day is affected by your actions and your attitude. So even if you don't care about the person that you're working for or the company, you should at least care about yourself. And know that you're affecting your environment that you have to go to work to every day, which we spend most of our lives in.
I wrote a book a few years ago, and in one of the chapters, I have a story about a woman in a educational institution, a big one here, who is the person who makes the sandwiches at lunchtime. And the care and the attention and the kindness and the compassion. I mean, it's hard to, it sounds ridiculous, but this woman did her job to the best of her ability, so much so that there were always lineups waiting to go to her station when there was lots of other options around. And part of it was, it was a great sandwich, but the other part was the connection she made with each person. And it made such a difference to the whole organization, even though you might think, well, she just made sandwiches.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to people have problems with themselves and they don't like themselves.
Mm.
And so when you see someone complaining about something or complaining about someone else or pointing the finger, a lot of times it really isn't who they're talking about. They're really feeling something about themselves. And I've noticed this, and I started, my mentor told me this, and I started watching this And I'm seeing it and I'm like, you know what? It's 100% right. So this lady that's in this making these sandwiches, she likes herself, not like conceited, but she's happy with herself. And then it shows through. And that then affects other people. But a lot of people have problems with themselves, some issue, they're not happy, they're underperforming, they're letting themselves down. And then it shows through and they take it out on other people or their attitude shows. And if people can grasp that and say, you know what, I need to work on me, figure out what my problems are with myself, solve those things, and then the rest generally takes care of itself.
That's true. That's true. Self-awareness is a lifelong project, I say.
Yep.
So where can people find you, C-Roc, if they want to connect with you, follow you on social media, etc.? Where can they reach out to you?
So first of all, I started a podcast to get this What Are You Made Of movement going. It's already started, but I just thought the podcast would be an excellent source and vehicle for it. It's called What Are You Made Of with Mike C-Roc. It's on all iTunes and Spotify and all your favorite platforms. But also I have a private Facebook group called What Are You Made Of with Mike C-Roc that all your listeners, if any of them come in, I'll let them in. And I try to add as much value as possible, but also create a platform for them to share their stories. And in there, I share of ways to use your stories for jobs, for your future, for yourself. And I look for other people to engage in that group. I've only had it open for a couple weeks, and I think we're already up to 600 members. So for your listeners, if they come in, shoot me a little message in there. But I'm all over Facebook as well, Instagram, Twitter. And my website is www.themikecroc with no K, themikecroc.com. My blog and podcast is all over that website as well. Anybody that wants to reach out to me, feel free. I'm not hard to find, and I love to engage with people. If there's anybody I can help, my mission is to help people. So please reach out to me. And I'm in the process. I have a book. It's not ready yet, or I'd give your listeners a book as well. But working on the What Are You Made Of book. It should be coming out within the next year. But I'm waiting on a couple of events to happen to be able to wrap it up because I want to write about them. And that's where I am.
Sounds great. And I'm going to ask you for one last piece of advice for the Careers by Jenn listener.
Okay, and this is something I'm doing personally right now, so I'll share this with you. I started to feel a little in a funk lately for some reason. I couldn't explain it. I just didn't feel right. And, I realized after sitting and meditating for a while and thinking and journaling, I need to get uncomfortable. I'm a little bit comfortable right now, and I don't like that. I mean, it's good to feel comfortable, but I need to push myself. So what I've been doing, Jen, and this isn't specifically what I'm telling your listeners to do. I'm telling them to get uncomfortable. Find something to get you uncomfortable to help you stretch or reach or grow. What I'm doing right now, I usually get up around 6 a.m., 6:30. I've been forcing myself to get up around 4:30. I hired a trainer. Now, you don't have to hire a trainer, but I just hired a trainer because it's different. I already go to the gym and work out. But I wanted to take it to the next level, so I hired a trainer. 5 a.m., I'm in the gym, and I told the trainer, make me as uncomfortable as possible. And I mean, literally, you guys know CrossFit, right? I do CrossFit type workouts, and I'm already working out hard. But this is a whole nother level to the point where I've almost passed out a couple times.
Oh, no.
And but I'm uncomfortable. And afterwards, I got up early. I feel like I have so much time in my day now because I don't have to work out at 8:30 like I usually do. And I'm looking at myself like I get all my stuff done. It's 8:30. I've already gone to the gym. And now wow, there's more things for me to do, but I have all this time. And it's like I was like gifted time. And time, we're all short on time. We all have the same amount of time. Time is a very, very valuable commodity. And when you can do that and create that by being uncomfortable. So that's my advice. Get uncomfortable. Find something that's going to make you uncomfortable and watch what happens.
That's great. Well, thank you, C-Roc, for taking time with us and sharing all of your insights, and the value that you have given the listener is wonderful. So thank you again.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me, Jen. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed myself today.
You've been listening to Careers by Jenn with Jenn Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. If every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.